So what we're doing today is just getting these fish systems ready for fish, because this restaurant's going to open in a couple of weeks. So adding a little bit of stock is going to be really important to start growing a little bit of bacteria so we can start establishing the filters. What I'm doing now is cleaning up some coral bone to put on the bottom of these tanks. Now the reason why you want coral bone on the bottom of these Chinese tanks is because the coral bone actually holds a whole lot of extra bacteria, which is a good thing. It's particularly good if the filters get shut off, which from time to time in these search situations it does. And the fact that there's aeration going on in the tank means that the good bacteria that grows in the gravel can help to keep the fish alive. And the calcium carbonate of this substrate is also going to help to keep the pH up, which can be a benefit as well, because with these systems, particularly when they get overloaded, the pH often falls. And so therefore this is a little bit of extra bacterial security and a little bit of extra pH security, and it does look nice. Now we've just given the skimmer a bit of a clean out, and we did find a hair tie in the skimmer, and that was clogged into the impeller, and that's why it wasn't actually working. Anyway, of these Chinese restaurant tanks with lights on. Water's all cloudy, of course. It's very common when you first set a tank up, especially adding new coral into the setup, that the water's going to get cloudy. So we're going to drain it, fill it up again before we mix salt in it. And even when you do that, it's still very common for it to go cloudy, because you'll often get a bacterial bloom, which is very normal in a new tank, and it'll go away, especially with the UVs on. But it's actually better to run your system initially without UVs on, because it helps the bacteria establish. And once the bacteria is well established, say about 1 or 2 months time, that's the best time to turn the UV on. Now with the lights on this system, the less the lights are on, the less algae you're getting. So you're really wanting to minimize how often the lights are on. And if you do have an algae problem, you want to minimize it even further, because reducing light is one of the best ways of reducing algae. So this pipe here was cracked and leaking. So we've replaced that now with a flexible pipe. All good to go. Aeration's on now. Aeration is a really, really important thing in these systems. We want to make sure there's plenty of oxygen to keep the fish alive. And the other thing that's so good about the oxygen running is if for some reason the filters are turned off, then the good bacteria that grows in the substrate and the oxygen will be a good way of helping keep the fish alive. So these things here are thermometers for checking the temperature, and they're also hydrometers. So basically, if you let that float in the water, once it stops bobbing up and down, and then if it bobs in salt water and the water level is at the top of the green, that means your salt level is nice and low. If it's at the bottom of the green, that means your salt level is high. For a system like this, for fish, you definitely want it on the low level. 0.020 is the highest that you want your salt, but if you have invertebrates, you want it to the higher level. So that just means it'll float. So that would be a low level and that would be a high level, and that's going to give you an indication of your salinity. Cold water, saltwater tanks, hence the double glazed glass, so the glass doesn't get misty, which it would do in a cold tank. And that goes down to this sump with a filter sock, protein skimmer, marine pure biological media. There's your sump level. Then we've got a chiller and a UV, which runs that system as well. Then we've got the little tank up there, which goes through this sump, and then there's a UV there. And that's a warm, fresh saltwater tank. It's got thermometers in it, heaters. They've got heaters in it. And that one there runs off this. And that is a warm freshwater tank, or a freshwater tank. And there does appear to be a blockage in the drain. because when too much water goes down there, it does actually bank up and leak a little bit, which isn't the end of the world on this floor, but that drain does appear to be blocked. All the aerations run now. There's your air stone. All the oxygen's running. The lights are running. Filters are running. Heaters are running. Chillers running. UVs are replaced and running. Now we've drained the water. And next we're going to fill it up again. And we'll add the salt. And get it ready to add some test fish. They call me G, the G clamp.
340 grams per litre.
Now we're just working out the salt level so we can dose up these tanks with salt.
Grams per litre.
Okay.
32 times 600.
Okay. Now we're measuring the salt out and turning those two and that one into a salt water tank. Now we're waiting for the salt to dissolve. And once the salt dissolves, we can then get a reading with our hydrometer. And we want the salt to be on the low side, like 0.020 as a maximum. And then if the salt level is too high, then we've got to do a water change with fresh water to bring the salt level down. The invertebrates are better off with the salt level high. The fish really want the salt level on the low side. So that must be monitored regularly. And then if the salt level is actually too low, then we have some spare salt. And then we just put some extra salt in the tanks that are low as need be. Now it's better when you're setting the tanks up to have the salt on the low side, because it's much easier to add salt than it is to take fresh water out to lower the salt. So raising salt is way easier. So what's going on in here? We have a protein skimmer. And then this cap, particularly the inside of that neck there needs to be cleaned twice a week. And this skimmer emptied. Got some mechanical media, got some biological media, got a heater. That is the filter for the freshwater tank. Then down here we have another skimmer. So that needs cleaning twice a week. When you're cleaning it, you're mainly cleaning the inside neck there as that builds up. We want to clean this filter sock at least once a week. Clean the pre-filter mats when they're dirty. Keep an eye on the sump level, because that'll go down with time. So the sump levels you need to be careful of is that one on the far side, this one on the back, and then this tank, because evaporation is going to be an issue. And remember that when you're topping up from evaporation, you're not adding salt, you're adding fresh water, because the salt concentrates, it does not evaporate. The other thing we could do is run some good bacteria through the system. That'd be a good idea too, just to speed up this process. So we're finished up for now. What we're doing is waiting for the salt level to stabilize, because we've added the salt. Then we come back, do one more check. Then we can look at putting a little bit of fish in, and we could add some good bacteria and let this system start establishing so we can get all ready for opening day. Now here at Majestic Aquariums, we're ridding our plastic shopping bags, going for the eco choice. So if you want to be one of the cool kids and take your fish home, you can get a Majestic Aquariums reusable shopping bag for $2.99.